Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 news. Positive updates for Ferrari going into the first official pre-season test in Bahrain, but not the same story can be said for McLaren. Some concerns about the car of the reigning world champions, whether they will start the season at a substantial disadvantage. But I want to trade to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Not far off 90k. This is the Williams, the FW48, hitting the track in Silverstone for the first time. We think they're going to do another filming day, the day before the test officially starts on the 10th of February. The test starts on the 11th, but on the 10th we think they might be running another filming day to get some more lap time running in Bahrain before the official test. But they did a filming day yesterday in Silverstone to get on track for the first time. Of course, in the shakedown livery, because they revealed their actual livery the other day, but this is not the one that they were running in the shakedown. They had a pre-season kind of plan there. They were meant to run this, of course, in Barcelona with this special livery. Then they never did. So, well, we know what the car now looks like. This is James Vowles watching the Williams pass by on the old pit straight at Silverstone on the run down to Copse Corner. This is possibly the best image that we have of the car so far. Of course, well, apart from this one, which obviously is the best image, where you can see a little bit about the front suspension. We'll talk a little bit more about that actually in a second in terms of the direction they've decided to go. But this from the side angle anyway, looking at the side pods, we'll see what they come up with when they drop this thing on the track in Bahrain. But it's probably going to be this car, let's be honest, because this is where we are now. We're only a few days away. This is what they're doing. Pull rod front suspension. This is particularly notable because not every team has done this. The general theory tends to be it doesn't make much difference, front pull rod, push rod, apart from aerodynamically. Some teams clearly still prefer one over the other, but by far the most teams this year are using push rod front suspension. Even Adrian Newey and Aston Martin, he's loved pull rod in the previous Red Bull era, so clearly he must be something in that. But yes, these are some initial Craig Scarborough notes on what the car looks like. We'll see if it's any good in Bahrain. These are the 8 teams using pushrod front suspension: McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, Racing Bulls, Aston Martin, Haas and Audi. Williams, Alpine and Cadillac are the 3 teams taking a different approach. So yes, intrigued to your thoughts as always on that in the comments below. Some comments from Lando Norris. We'll get back to the McLaren in the coming minutes, but this time last year, guys might remember, I think it was the Autosport Awards, whatever it was, and George Russell said to Lando, "You're the title favourite, are you not?" Which he was at that moment, because it was expected McLaren were going to have the best car, which they did, and Lando would crush Piastri with no resistance. Of course, that didn't happen, right? Piastri was leading the championship for a long time, and Max stayed in the fight for various reasons, but indeed Lando did win the championship. Now this year, George is a substantial favourite for this year's title, ahead of Max Verstappen. Those odds have actually shifted quite substantially in Russell's favour in recent days, especially after the Barcelona shakedown. So this was put to Lando, and Lando says, yeah, definitely agree, right? Take all the pressure off me, put it all onto George. So Lando then goes on to say if this is it for him in terms of what he's won, then he'll be still happy with that. And that's the frustrating thing for someone like Oscar Piastri, right? Because last year, you know, was a golden opportunity. This year, who knows? As we'll discuss with McLaren in a second, they have some problems to solve. Now, Lando says, look, I've still got many more years ahead of me. I'm going to try and win as many championships as I can. I don't feel any different this year. I just want to go out and win. But if I never win another one, then I'm still happy with what I have accomplished here. He also describes this new generation, what's changed, what needs to change. You're going to see more chaos in races. There's more emphasis on a driver's ability to control all of these things in the energy management. You're going to see more yo-yoing, more moves with extra speed, but then that person might have to defend more. It will create more chaos, he goes on to say. The other part of the McLaren puzzle is Papaya rules. Will they come back, and if they do, in what form? Piastri says they're back, but not how they were precisely. Now, I think it was Andreas Stella said the other day that no, we won the championship, didn't we? Right? So, if anything, those rules were vindicated. But Piastri says no, conversations have been had to save ourselves some headaches. Piastri explains the Papaya rules will have an evolution. It will look different. We probably caused headaches for ourselves that we didn't need to at points last year. As a general principle, it does bring positives. It's how we refine that to keep the positives. Some tweaks for sure this year. I think it's pretty clear we still want to go racing as much as a team as we can. I think think there was a lot more made out about it than actually happens, and there was a lot of hypothetical situations, a lot of people that kind of think without knowing the complete inner workings. A lot of things appear differently to how they actually are, because of course there was this talk about the Papaya rules giving some advantage for Piastri to leave the pits first or last, or whatever we wanted to do, and there was all that discussion. Of course, we don't really know what the actual list of Papaya rules are. Of course, understandably, there's going to be speculation, and McLaren dug their own hole with some of the things they were doing. You know, they created a lot of the speculation, arguably unnecessarily. So Piastri says they'll be different, but they will still be there. Will it be relevant in a title battle? That's another discussion. The other debate of today is on this Mercedes engine trick. Now, we talked yesterday that Audi and Honda are particularly annoyed about it. Red Bull, we think they're trying to do what Mercedes have done, but they're not quite able to achieve it reliably yet, which is increasing the compression ratio when the engine is actually running. Ferrari seem to just be accepting the reality. Audi and Honda, however, because arguably those are the new manufacturers brought back in by this era, if they feel like this era has already been ruined because Mercedes have found a loophole, a grey area, a trick, a cheat, whatever you want to say, to gain an unfair advantage, that will certainly be their perspective. They're going to join legal forces and report an alleged breach in entry conditions. Now, they're going to allege some sort of lack of neutrality because the FIA were working with Mercedes on this idea or whatever. If the FIA doesn't resolve this quickly, of course, these are some updates on other teams, but we'll get back to that. Now, there's been a lot of talk. How are they doing this, right? Is it achievable solely through thermal deformation? The argument seems to be no, probably not. And that's what AMUS say in their article. This is also interesting. The stated output of the combustion engines is 400 kilowatts. That's roughly 535 horsepower, I think. Mercedes are aiming for 424 kilowatts, which is more like 560, 570, right? So they're looking at maybe a 30 horsepower over what it was meant to be. Now, other teams may also be above 400 kilowatts because there's no limit there. Whereas I'm pretty sure the electrical side is limited to 350, whereas the combustion side is limited only by the regulations that define it, not by power output. It appears the regulators believed that 400 would be the number, but Mercedes are seemingly getting significantly above that. Whether other teams can compete, that's a good question. So how are they doing it? Is it thermal deformation? That's probably part of it, but you know, every engineer knows and understands that. You would think that other teams might be using something similar to get close. There's this other rumor, and I can't for the life of me think that this is actually how they're doing it. But anyway, AMUS say that there's a rumour that's circulated that they may have connected a small pocket in the combustion chamber via a very thin channel. Now, in cold conditions in a static test, this volume fills up as the piston moves upwards, but when driving at higher temperatures and speeds, it goes over a certain pressure threshold, which means that volume doesn't expand into that channel, and as a result, the compression ratio goes up. Now, look, they could be doing this. If they are, I think it's probably a quite clear... It's like a Ferrari tricking the sensor, right? Like, I don't know, is this just clever technology, or is this like deliberately adding something into the engine? Because I think we want the innovation in the sport that is achieved through all the phenomenal engineers that work on these things to be ideas that, I don't know, might have some viability in the real world. And maybe this is to a degree, but it's an interesting idea because if they've just added this extra segment and they're using special channels to come up with this solution where it's effectively something, it's a deliberately inbuilt trick to trick the regulators. Effectively, that's what this type of thing would be, rather than, you know, you might, I mean, it obviously is clever engineering, but you see what I'm saying? I think there's a little difference there between using some special combination between thermally deforming materials and combining it in a clever way, rather than using like a secret channel which is solely designed for this purpose. Now, again, it's only a theory, and apparently other teams also feel maybe that is what they're doing. but apparently an inquiry with the FIA revealed the trick is not as described, or basically that trick wouldn't be allowed. So one engineer said that the FIA told them that if that's what Mercedes were doing, it wouldn't be allowed. So Mercedes might be doing something similar to this, that it's obviously the teams are trying to figure out what they are doing. This might be part of it, but also the FIA apparently are saying that's not it, because Mercedes worked with the FIA. At least they checked their working with the FIA as they were going along their process. And Mercedes, as a result, are apparently willing to fire back. So if the FIA changes its mind on pressure from Audi and from Honda, then Mercedes, they're also getting the team of loyals prepared and the fountain pens inked up so they can fire back if required. So this could get rather tasty. We understand the most likely development here is that the FIA will say, all right guys, you get some extra development time, or all right Mercedes, we're going to ban it but not until the end of this year, or whatever. Ferrari are expecting it to be real, like legal, in addition to real, because we're pretty sure that it is real at this point. And apparently, Ferrari have already looked to start to make some changes here regarding this legal trick. So maybe Ferrari will be well positioned of the other manufacturers to actually catch up. But it does look like the Mercedes is going to start off with some sort of advantage. Now let's talk about the benefit for Ferrari elsewhere. In addition to this, that comes down to correlation on the track. So according to rumours from Motorsport Italia, that when they went back to the factory and they did all the deep dive into the numbers that they saw at the circuit in Barcelona compared to what they expected to see on the simulator running and what the drivers saw, they found a strong correlation. Now, you would expect the correlation to be better in this era than the last. The ground effect cars created massive complications. Many teams struggle with that. You can imagine how complicated it is when you're dealing with... Look, ground effect still exists, by the way. It's still existing on these cars. There's just no Venturi tunnels, which makes it much better for the drivers, but also reduces significantly the amount of downforce generated from the floor. But look, in the simulator, presumably, the track is perfectly flat, but in reality it's not. There are slight bumps, there are slight deviations, and, there's camber, there's rocks on the track, these other things, well, not rocks exactly, but little pebbles, right? They get pushed on the track, there's marbles. And, when you try and consider that the actual car driving and all of those things, everything's going to be slightly different, and how sensitive the car is to that on the track. The real track running is always going to be the key factor. But reportedly, there's good data, right? So Ferrari are happy with what they found. There were no big surprises. They topped the timesheet to the end of the week. They had a very reliable engine, at least on the 2025 hybrid fuels, which will not be the same, we think, as they're going to use in Bahrain, and certainly not the same that they're going to turn up to Melbourne with for the start of the season. But this is good news for Ferrari. There were no big red flags, no major concerns about their car. We think they could be slightly over the weight limit, and we think that is certainly true for the McLaren. So just to give you guys the update on this, it's all rather confusing. The minimum weight is technically 768. The published weight of the Ferrari and the Haas was 770. The published weight of the Merc and the Williams was 772 and 772.4 respectively, which looks like, wow, every team's done a great job. They're right on the number, pretty much, not far to go. However, there is more to it than this. My understanding is, based on what we've seen over the recent days, is that these figures that the teams have given us are basically their interpretation of the minimum weight number, not the actual weight of their car. Because while it's 768 technically, there are a couple of reasons why it's actually in practice a little bit more than that, depending on how you measure it and do the calculation. It changes slightly. So I'm pretty sure that's the numbers that we are seeing here, not the real numbers that the car actually weighs. And then we've not seen that from McLaren yet. So McLaren, the reigning world champions, but they've got to design all this brand new chassis around a brand new engine, which isn't theirs. So it's obviously going to be a challenge compared to what some of the works teams are capable of doing. And it felt like the works teams, the Mercedes, the Ferrari especially, were probably, and even the Red Bull arguably, the best prepared of the teams that we saw in Barcelona. Now, this is what Auto Racer have to say. I'll link the entire article down below that they talk a little bit about the front nose or the front wing and the nose of the front wing. It has a very thin front nose. It's, well, obviously they're the reigning world champions. They should be well positioned. However, the factory's done a great job, but to pass the crash test, the nose had to be slightly extended downwards, which is advantageous for airflow, but it's not reducing weight. You can actually see on this image anyway, compared to the Ferrari, how much further that nose goes. And as a result, the MCL 40 will start testing well above the minimum weight, but with a weight reduction plan for Melbourne. The cars are expected to be slimmed down gradually. So this is interesting because, as I said, for the last few days we're talking about, are the cars even at the minimum weight limit already? What's going on? The answer seems to be no. We believe that Ferrari are probably over to at least some degree. Aston Martin certainly are. And now McLaren's will be as well. Probably not just because of those, but for various reasons. But apparently well over the weight limit. You know, what is well over? Is that 10 kg? Is that 15? Is that 20? Is that 30 that some people thought the Williams might be? Who knows? But the reality is, let's say it's 10, 15. That's probably 3, 4, 5 tenths a lap in performance. Substantial gains to be had from the car, but also that other teams could gain on them if they are lighter at the start of the season. So clearly, the McLaren is not in an ideal... There's a reason why they're not the favourites for this year's World Championship, right? Yes, they won last year and the year before that in pretty dominant fashion. Yes, Lando is the reigning World Drivers' Champion, but there are a few reasons why, with this complexity that we're going into, it was not expected that McLaren would necessarily continue in the same vein of form. I don't think they were ever going to dominate this season. I guess we'll see. I might be speaking too soon here, but I don't think McLaren were ever going to dominate 2026. There's certainly a world where they could still win, could still be very competitive, but I think it was always expected that McLaren would certainly be brought back to the front of the field, or reined in, let's say, by the top contenders at the very least. This may be a reason why. If Mercedes are lighter, as well as being seemingly better prepared with all the other factors, it's going to be difficult for McLaren to make major progress as the season goes on. So intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Just one final thing, looking at the salaries of the drivers. The rumoured salaries, we don't know the real numbers, most of these anyway, so I'll just go through it and take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. But Verstappen, Hamilton, number 1, number 2. Leclerc, we think, is getting a pretty big pay rise as well. He's up to 3rd, tied, it seems, with George Russell at roughly 34 million euros for the season. Norris, despite being reigning champion, is only 5th. Then Alonso, Sainz, Piastri, Gasly, Albon. So that's pretty interesting. Then Stroll at roughly 12 million. Perez, Bottas, Hulkenberg, Hadjar. I said Bottas earlier just because they're teammates. But, a number of expected drivers. Thought it was kind of interesting when you look down at some of the rookies, because Hadjar's got a pretty big boost, right? He's up to 5 million at Red Bull, of course, for the upcoming season. Whereas Antonelli is apparently stuck at 2 million, right? Despite being at Mercedes, you might expect that number to be a little bit higher, but for now it looks like he's making roughly 1/17 of what George Russell is. We'll see if that changes by the end of this season. But very much interested to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. Just one final thing, actually. Aston Martin have confirmed their partnership with Breitling and has made people wonder whether there could be any sort of features appearing on the upcoming car, because it will certainly be part of their livery. So hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.